All right, good morning, folks. This is the last lesson of our last unit of grade 9. So I hope that all of you are doing well, and I hope that you're getting your work done, and you still have one hand-in assignment, hand-in number 3 to do, and you have a test after this. So just keep those things in mind. So we can't celebrate too much. We still have some work to do. But I do want to say that I do really appreciate you guys showing up and doing the work when it's tough. Okay, so let's get on to this last lesson and let's make it a quick one. This one, we're not going to graph anything. The graphs are given to you, and this is like a matching. This is matching the graphs to the equations and knowing which one matches where. Okay, so the easiest way to do it, I find sometimes, is to create a table of values for the equations. I find that works really well. So y equals x. So really what that means is whatever my x value is, my y value is. Whatever my y value is, my x value is. Let me just zoom in here. Fix that up. Okay. So if I say my x value is -2, my y value is -2. If my x value is 0, my y value is 0. My x value is +2, my y value is +2. So knowing this information, I can look at the graphs and say which graph has these coordinate pairs. Which graph has a -2 and a -2 and then 0, 0 and then 2, 2. Now it's important you do more than one point because if you look at all these graphs, they actually all pass through 0, 0. So if I only looked at that point, that doesn't help us solve this. So let's look at graph B. So we're looking for -2, -2. So if I'm at -2, this one's at 6. So that's graph B, definitely not the one we're looking for. Let's look at graph C. So when I'm at -2, -2. Oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, so maybe a possibility because that point works. We know 0, 0 works. Okay, let's look at 2. So when we're at 2, we're at +2. Awesome. So this equation matches graph C. So you do still have to do a little bit of work, but it's not terrible. So my next equation is y equals 2x. So when I do my table of values, I'm going to pick some values. So let's do -2, 0, and 2. So let's substitute -2 in here. And we're going to do it in our heads because we're getting better at this. So 2 times -2 is going to be a -4. 0 times 2 is going to give me 0. And 2 times +2 is a +4. Okay, so let's look at these again. So we know graph C is done. So this one we've already identified. So I'm just going to draw a squiggly line through it because I know that that one's been used. So now I'm only looking at graph A and graph B. Okay, so in graph B, we had the point -2 and 6. Well, that doesn't match our table because -2 has to be at 4. So let's look at graph A. So at -2, it's at -4. Yay! So this one is graph A. So by default, we know that this is going to be graph B. So we've had to do a little bit of work, but it's not a ton of work. And I'm not doing like a super serious table of values. I'm doing something very quick. Okay? Easy peasy. All right. So now, example number 2. Which graph on the grid has the equation of this? Now, you can always go back and do a table of values, but I'm going to tell you a quick way. I know that it's graph 3. And you're like, yeah, Scallion, you've been doing this forever. You should know it's graph 3. Okay, I want to tell you that if you have a B value, if you have that, that's where it crosses the y-axis. So when I look at these graphs, graph 1, graph I, crosses at a +2. I need it to cross at a -4. Graph 2 crosses at 0. And graph 3 is the only one that crosses at -4. So I know that my B value is where it's going to cross the y-axis. Remember, y-axis is straight up and down. If you don't believe me, do a table of values. If this doesn't make any sense to you, go back to what we did in the first one, and you're doing the table of values off this equation. So I'm going to pick -2, 0, and 2. So again, I'm going to do this in my head. So 3 times -2 is -6. -6 minus 4 is -10. 3 times 0 is 0. Minus 4 is a -4. And if I put a 2 in here, this would be 3 times 2, which is 6. 6 minus 4 is 2. All right. So if I'm looking at, I predicted that this is going to be graph 3 because of this point here, because this is the only graph that crosses at -4. Now, if there was another graph that both crossed at -4, I would actually have to do my table of value anyway. It just happens that none of these, except for this one, crosses at -4, but let's double check. So at -2, oh, that's 10, that's off the page. So let's look at +2. So at +2, I should be at 2. So +2, and I am at 2. So this point here was 2, 2, and that is a good equation in my line. This graph here at 2 was way off the graph. This graph here at 2 is way off the graph. So graph 3 is the only one that matches my table of value. But I knew this before I even did my table of values because of this number right here. This, not the one with the x, just the constant. The constant tells you where it crosses the y-axis. Okay? But you have to rearrange your equation to y equals. It has to be in the form y equals mx plus b. So a single y, everything else on the other side, and your b value is where the graph crosses, the y-axis. I couldn't spell. This is definitely a lesson that you're going to have to watch the video for, because I don't think the notes are going to do it justice. Okay, so that's really how easy it is. And we have one more example to do, another matching. This whole lesson is about matching. So although the assignment looks really long, it looks really long because you needed graphs for each equation because you need to be able to match them. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I don't want to use table of values. I'm going to rearrange some things. So I'm looking at this one here. Everything else is y equals, so that's good and that's good. This one I want to rearrange. Let me zoom in here. All right. So this one I've got circled I want to rearrange. I want to get it to y equals and then everything else on the other side. Okay? So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. So I have y equals -x plus 3. Okay, so I know that I have a graph that crosses at +3, a graph that crosses at +3, and a graph that crosses at -3. Well, all I have to do is find the one that crosses at -3, and I'm pretty good, because that will definitely be the one that crosses at -3. So I'm going to go and I'm going to look. This one doesn't cross at -3, but this one does. This does cross at -3. I'm just going to double check this one. This one crosses at +3. So without doing any math, I know that this one matches this graph. So this is the y equals 3x minus 3. And I'm done. I'm done with that one. Now I just got to figure out the other two, because this one crosses at +3 and this one crosses at +3. So I need to figure out which graph either A or C matches. So I'm going to look at this table of values here. So y equals 3x plus 3. And I'm going to do a little quick table of values for it. I'm going to do... Let's do -2, 0, and 2. Okay, and again, I'm going to do it in my head. So negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3. If I put 0 in here, 3 times 0 is 0, plus 3 is 3. And if I'm going too fast for you, pause the video and actually do the math where you're substituting it in. So y equals negative 2 plus 3, which would give me negative 6 plus 3, which would give me the negative 3. So I'm doing that in my head, but if I'm going too fast for you, please make sure that you stop and you practice, you substitute it in, you do the math, you take the time, and you solve it. So I did that in my head while I was talking to you. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 3 is 9. Okay, so I'm looking for the graph that has a coordinate pair at negative 2, 3, and 2, 9. So if I look at negative 2, I should be at negative 3. So this graph definitely isn't it. So let's go check out my graph C. So at negative 2, I'm at negative 3. And let's just double check the 2 points. So at 2, I should be at 9. Aha, already done. So we know that graph C is, sorry, that shouldn't be there. Put this down here, y equals 3x plus 3. That was one I was working on. We know that this graph over here, y equals 3x plus 3, belongs with this graph. So even though I know that they cross at the same place, I still had to do a quick table of values to double check my points. So by default, this must mean that this graph is the y equals negative x plus 3. So that's it. Like, I didn't do a ton of math, but I did have to do some, and I do need to reason it out. So you have a practice assignment, which I encourage you to do, and you also have your hand-in assignment. If you have any questions, let me know.